It is 1 a.m. in Washington, 8 in Kiev, and 2 on a Monday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Gun-young. Here's a look at your headlines at this hour. The final responsibility lies with me, says President Park Geun-hye in her first public apology to the nation over a ferry disaster that has killed more than 300 people. She vows to dismantle the country's Coast Guard and set up a Ministry of National Safety. New data shows the number of those effectively unemployed in Korea is triple the official figure. It's leading the government to seek changes in the way it measures the jobless rate. And Vietnam clamps down on anti-China protests in the wake of deadly rioting over sovereignty in the South China Sea, while Beijing suspends bilateral exchange plans and evacuates its nationals from the Southeast Asian country. We'll have those stories and more, but first, let us begin right here in this country. 33 days have passed since the Seoul ferry sank off Korea's southwestern coast, taking with it the lives of hundreds of people, many of whom were high school students. And on this Monday, President Park Geun-hye, in what became a tearful nationally televised address, apologized for the disaster and laid out measures to bolster national safety. As our correspondent Choi-sun reports, topping the list was dismantling the country's Coast Guard.
이번 사고에 제대로 대처하지 못한 최종 책임은 대통령인 저에게 있습니다.
For the first time since the Seoul ferry accident last month, President Park directly apologized to the nation. It came amid criticism of her previous apologies, as many people felt she wasn't taking full responsibility as the head of state, saying that the Coast Guard had failed to fulfill its duties in swiftly attending to the passengers of the sinking ferry. President Park said she was dissolving the organization.
국가안전처를 만들어 각 부처에 분산된 안전 관련 조직을 통합하고 지휘 체계를 일원화해서 육상과 해상에서 일어나는 모든 유형의 재난에 현장 중심으로 대응할 수 있는 체제를 만들겠습니다.
President Park also talked about cutting off ties between the public sector and private entities. Claims of cronyism between the two have been blamed for the government's insufficient and lax handling of the disaster. She suggested tripling the number of public organizations and affiliates that are barred from employing retired public employees and extending the period after which retired workers can return to the workforce. Regarding the punishment of those linked to the ferry disaster, the president seemingly took account of what the victims' families requested during a meeting at the presidential office last week.
필요하다면 특검을 해서 모든 진상을 낱낱이 밝혀내고 엄정하게 처벌할 것입니다. 그리고 여야와 민간이 참여하는 진상조사위원회를 포함한 특별법을 만들 것도 제안합니다.
President Park said that she will not leave their deaths in vain and designate April 16, the day of the sinking, as a day to remember their sacrifices. Choi-sun, ARIRANG News.
And on the investigation front, prosecutors say they're done playing games with the de facto owner of the sunken ferry operator who has so far defied court summons. A special team tasked with bringing in Yoo Byung-eun by the end of this week is now in place. Our Shin Se-min has the latest developments.
Prosecutors looking for the elusive practical owner of the sunken Seoul ferry say they will make all effort to bring him in by week's end. In a briefing held Sunday, the leader of the Seoul Investigation Task Force said a special squad of more than 40 detectives would be formed to track Yoo Byung-eun down and arrest him. He said Yoo and his family have mocked the government and challenged authority in defying orders to come in for questioning. The 73-year-old is suspected of tax evasion and embezzlement of millions of dollars from company affiliates owned by him and members of his family. Prosecutors believe his illegal actions contributed to the sinking of the Seoul ferry. Yoo is presumed to be holed up inside a religious compound his family owns in Gyeonggi-do province. The area is currently surrounded by supporters of Yoo who are blocking off authorities from entering. The prosecution has said it is considering raiding the compound. Arrest warrants for Yu's second son and eldest daughter, both of whom are residing abroad, have been issued after the two failed to appear for questioning. Yu's eldest son, who was involved in the day-to-day operations of the company that owned the Seoul ferry, has also refused to cooperate with prosecutors. His whereabouts are unknown. Over a month has passed since the Seoul ferry capsized off the southwestern coast of Korea. The confirmed death toll from the tragedy stands at 286, with 18 victims still unaccounted for. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
And front and center of a month-long parliamentary session that kicked off on this Monday in Seoul's National Assembly will also be the ferry disaster. The Korean people want lawmakers to put aside their political differences and come up with substantive results. But with the rival parties already bickering over the timing and scope of the investigation, there are fears that next 30 days could end up being an unproductive grind. Our political correspondent Kim Kwan-jin with this report.
The Seoul ferry tragedy will dominate this month's parliamentary extraordinary session. Under the plans already agreed upon by the ruling Saenuri Party and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, a request for a parliamentary investigation into the disaster will be submitted on Tuesday. It will be followed by a two-day session where lawmakers will grill government officials over the failed response to the nation's worst maritime disaster in decades. But not all related officials will appear.
The Oceans Minister and the Coast Guard Chief will not attend the hearings as they have the responsibility of being at the Seoul ferry accident site.
The opposition alliance wants a number of investigations into the tragedy launched immediately. It is calling for a parliamentary probe, a separate independent council investigation, and a parliamentary hearing.
The special committee on Seoul ferry opens today. We must devise measures to help the families of the victims, and we must conduct a parliamentary probe. The National Assembly must accomplish all we need to do.
However, the ruling party is likely to approach the issues more cautiously and focus more on follow-up measures and uncovering the cause of the accident. Especially with regard to the special council investigation, the two parties are unlikely to reach a consensus, with the Saenuri Party and New Politics Alliance for Democracy bickering over its timing and scope, as well as the appointment of a special counsel. Both rival parties plan to finalize the details of a special parliamentary investigation into the April ferry disaster on May 27th. Kim Kwan-jin, ARIRANG News.
The defense ministers from South Korea, the U.S. and Japan will sit down in Singapore later this month to discuss North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. South Korea's defense ministry said today that Kim Kwan-jin, Hagel and Itsunori Onodera will meet on May 31st on the sidelines of the 13th Asia Security Summit. Although the details of the meeting are to be finalized sometime next week, the North Korea threat will top the agenda, especially with a fourth nuclear test looming. The sharing of military intelligence will also likely be on the table, as Seoul has been pushing for the three sides to sign an MOU on the matter. The trilateral defense meeting has been held annually since 2009. A former U.S. official says the Obama administration's North Korea policy has failed. In an interview with South Korea's Yonhap News Agency, Evans Revere, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, said the U.S. has set its focus too squarely on suspending the regime's nuclear development, knowing full well that Pyongyang has no intention of ever giving up its nuclear arms. The former diplomat, who is experienced in negotiating with the North, said Washington's policy is too passive, and he called for more pressure and stronger sanctions. He added the six-party denuclearization talks involving the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia, of course, have lost their original objective due to Pyongyang's unwillingness to compromise.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Moon Gon-yong live from Seoul.
Shopping market for the dual use of the Korean name East Sea and the Japanese name Sea of Japan in school textbooks in the state of Virginia. Korea's unemployment rate officially stands at 3.9%, which is an enviable figure compared to many other countries around the world. In reality, however, that figure is very far off the mark. Our Hwang Ji-hye tells us what's behind the discrepancy and what the government is doing to address it.
The latest version of Korea's jobs data shows that slightly over 1 million people are unemployed, but the data doesn't tell the whole story. Economists look past the official jobless rate to a so-called actual unemployment rate that includes those who are underemployed or discouraged from finding a job. Taking them into account, the actual jobless bracket included over 3 million individuals in April, more than 3 times the government's official figure. Statistics Korea, which compiles the jobs data, counts only those who don't have a job despite their efforts to get one. The nation's announced unemployment rate stood at 3.9% last month, but the actual jobless rate was 11%. Experts say the current method of counting the unemployed is too narrow and does not provide a real picture of the labor market conditions. In response to the criticism, the statistics agency plans to release a new set of data in November which provide jobless figures based on international standards, which include the underemployed and the discouraged. It said the extra data would give a more accurate explanation of the nation's job market. Hwang Ji, ARIRANG News.
3 of the nation's leading credit card firms are now fully back to work as a 3-month business suspension for their involvement in the biggest personal data leak in Korean history has come to an end. However, financial authorities will keep an eye on them and stand ready with more sanctions if they step out of line ever again. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
Credit card companies KB Gungmin Card, Lotte Card, and NH Nongyap Card have resumed operations after a 3-month business suspension following the leak of personal data of some 140 million customers. Starting with online services, the card companies are now able to issue new credit cards, extend loans, and provide cash advances. The firms will also promote a series of new card products with ample benefits to attract new customers and make up for the loss incurred during the suspension period. The ban is believed to have cost the companies tens of millions of dollars and millions of customers. The country's biggest ever data leak was caused by an employee from a credit ratings agency stealing personal information, including identification numbers and bank account numbers, and selling it to an advertising company. Meanwhile, financial authorities are planning to offer greater incentives for reporting of illegal practices of card firms when issuing new credit cards. The Financial Supervisory Service said those who report of illegal methods to entice customers, such as issuing credit cards on the streets or offering giveaways that exceed 10% of the annual membership fee, will be able to receive roughly $490 in incentives, 5 times more than the original amount. The reporting period will also be extended to 60 days from the current 20 and can be done through the Credit Finance Association, the Financial Supervisory Service, or individual card companies. The financial authorities say they will inspect the credit card companies during the second half of the year, and if they conduct wrongdoings or irregularities, they will be subject to heftier punishment. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Let's now turn to Samsung. Well, its dominance isn't merely limited to the smartphone market. 7 out of 10 smart watches sold globally during the first quarter this year were made by the Korean firm. U.S.-based market research firm Strategy Analytics says Samsung Electronics shipped out some 500,000 smartwatches in the first 3 months of this year, good for more than 71% of the global market. That's a big jump from the 52% recorded last year and also far ahead of Samsung's 2 closest competitors in the market, which are Sony and Pebble. They both had 11% of the market in the first quarter. Strategy Analytics said the only possible threat to Samsung's dominance is Apple's iWatch, which is set to hit the market later this year. U.S. lawmakers are calling for action against Korean steelmakers for selling products in the U.S. for less than market value. Now, 56 members of the U.S. Senate denounced a preliminary ruling made by the U.S. Commerce Department back in February that imposed anti-dumping duties on imports from 8 countries but excluded steel pipes and tubes made in Korea. Now, they are calling on the Commerce Department to review Korea's case out of concern that there will be economic impact on U.S. steelmakers. A final determination may be made in July, with the U.S. International Trade Commission making a final decision by August 21st. Its mammoth deal, U.S. telecom firm AT&T has announced plans to acquire top satellite service provider DirecTV for nearly $50 billion. Now, this huge deal would make AT&T the #2 provider in terms of television subscribers in the U.S., only behind a combined Comcast-Time Warner Cable. The board of directors at both AT&T and DirecTV have already approved the deal, which has the potential to reshape the television landscape in the United States. Now, under the terms, AT&T will pay $48.5 billion to DirecTV in both stock and cash, and also assume DirecTV debts, pushing the overall value of the deal to more than $67 billion. The companies hope the transaction can be completed in roughly 12 months. Now, Comcast, the biggest cable provider in the U.S., is currently awaiting approval for plans to merge with Time Warner Cable. In Vietnam, there's been quite an exodus of Chinese citizens over the weekend following the deadly anti-China rioting there. Some 3,000 expats have fled the Southeast Asian country, and that number is expected to grow as Beijing sends ships to evacuate more of its nationals in the coming days. Hanoi, in response, has promised stronger measures to quell the anti-China unrest. Here's Kim Ji-yeon with this story.
China is demanding Vietnam to do more to protect Chinese nationals amid anti-China protests in Vietnam, sparked by an oil rig in disputed waters in the South China Sea. Beijing is urging Hanoi to take tougher measures to quell the violence. It evacuated thousands of Chinese nationals from Vietnam following the attacks that killed at least 2 people and injured dozens. China has reportedly sent 2 charter flights and 5 ships to the region.
We sent our best crewmen to Vietnam for the evacuation.
A country heavily reliant on foreign investment, the Vietnamese government has called for an end to the protests. Businesses and workers affected by the unrest have criticized the local authorities for their lax response, accusing the police of arriving too late or in insufficient numbers. Vietnamese police have a reputation of blocking such demonstrations before they can take place. Anger spread and protests of hundreds took to the streets of Vietnam's major cities after a state-run energy firm from China towed an oil rig in waters claimed by both China and Vietnam. This recent spat is the worst since a border dispute between the 2 countries in 1979. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
Turkish police have charged 4 people with negligence in connection to the Soma coal mine collapse that claimed the lives of more than 300 workers. Now, Turkey's semi-official Anadolu news agency reports the operating manager of Soma Coal Mining Company was among those arrested alongside 2 engineers and a security chief. Earlier, 25 were detained and questioned as part of the probe. Now, this as mourning family members bury the last of the 301 workers killed in the large-scale accident. Demonstrations condemning the government's handling of the disaster continued into the weekend as hundreds of people occupy the capital of Ankara, Istanbul, and Izmir. In Soma, protests were banned by local authorities. Now, the first suspected person-to-person transmission of the Middle East respiratory virus has been recorded in the United States. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said a man from Illinois likely picked up the infection from an Indiana man during a business meeting earlier this month, though he did not show the symptoms of the virus and was reportedly feeling fine. The Indiana man, however, was hospitalized shortly after traveling from Saudi Arabia, where he works as a healthcare professional. The U.S. Health Institute says the case does not change the risk to the general public, which remains quite low. And now it's time for our first arts and culture segment of the week, and our Im Yoon-hee joins us live. Here today, she has a play with two very big names in Korea's acting. Good afternoon to you, Yoon-hee.
Good afternoon.
So what do you have in store for us?
Right, so Lee Soon-jae and Ko Do-mi, they're both legendary names in the business. They've been around for decades.
Ko Do-shim, you mean?
Yes, Ko Do-shim, exactly. And so Lee Soon-jae actually plays the character of a beloved grandpa in many events and many movies and dramas, and so he lends a supporting hand in this, but he's not just limited to supporting roles anymore. We've actually seen a rise in the casting of the senior actors in the starring roles, and so this play shows just what decades of experience brings to the stage. Let's take a look.
His wife is dying, his very first love. After sacrificing everything for her husband and child, Soon-jae is sick, and it pains her family to see her this way. Now, in the face of death, they realize the importance of forgiveness and the purity of true love. Lee Soon-jae and Ko Do-shim are both familiar faces. They've played countless roles in movies and dramas for years in the industry. And now they've come together as a couple, refining their love for each other and for a life as they face the hurdles that come with aging.
Previously, we always played the role of a father-in-law and daughter-in-law, but this time we are actually appearing as a couple, and I'm honored to be next to the great Ko Do-shim.
Although she lived for her husband and child, now confronted with death, she shows the life of a woman, not of a mother and of a wife.
This performance shows Soon-jae as she reflects on her first love. It's beautiful and pure from the wrinkled face to the graying hairs. We have perfectly been transformed to the elderly couple.
Since the debut performance in 2010, the show is now entering its second appearance. It shows the rough edges of a country dialect, but it also reveals the warmth and beauty of love and forgiveness.
The importance of family is really reinforced with this performance.
Seeing how the wife is to the husband to the wife, makes you think about the reality of life.
These veteran actors are some of the most decorated on the screen and the stage, and now they lend their hand to a play that illustrates love, hope, and forgiveness found in the cracks and flaws of a beautiful life.
You know, some of us may not know the exact names of these actors, but they're definitely, you know, by face we can recognize them because we've seen them on TV for so many years. Now, I think I've seen them pretty recently. What else are they involved?
Right, so they're both very busy right now. Ko Do-shim is currently co-starring in a drama called My Mother's Garden, and in Lee Soon-jae, he's also co-starring in a new comedy drama that's out called Flower Grandpa's Investigations.
Flower Grandpa's Investigations.
Right, mouthful.
Right. But I think we've seen a trend of these older actors coming back on stage, whether that be a play or movie or whatnot. Why is that?
Right, so we have been seeing this trend, and part of the reason is that the age audience is actually getting a little bit older, so more and more of the upper age bracket audience members are coming out to more events. But also, this show called Grandpa Over Flowers, that's a reality show that came out, it's hitting its second season now, that was very popular, and it really did make this grandpa, you know, this trend. And so now that they're seeing more and more senior characters, senior actors, they're really realizing the talent that they hold and bringing them out to the stage more often.
Right, and I think the younger generation are realizing how cute and how, you know, how the kind of relations that we can actually connect to these seniors and older generations. Right. And I think that's actually playing a role in that as well. And I myself enjoy that show. All right, Yoon-hee, thank you so much for the report.
My pleasure.
Good afternoon. It's safe to say that summer weather has arrived. Right now, due to the high pressure front, we are seeing perfectly clear sunny skies. However, it looks like clouds will move in this afternoon. Now, while we can enjoy this warm temperatures, especially down in Daegu, topping out as highs in the 30s, we also have to watch out for the high UV levels, so make sure to apply sunblock before heading out. Now, going over to our temperature readings, Seoul tops out at 26 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will peak up to 29 and 24 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops out at 25, Dokdo at 22, while Mangungang tops out at 9. Now as for the weather conditions down in Chindo today, it's a bit foggy, but the winds and waves are pretty calm. And starting today, the neap tide period begins, which means slower currents, making the search much easier for the divers. Well, that's all I have at this moment. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you, Kanyang.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you for watching. I'll be back with you at 4 p.m. Korea time.